National Women's Day, a day we should celebrate. But the United Nations has warned that the world is 300 years away. Can you believe that? 300 years away from gender equality, with hard-won progress toward the goal vanishing before our eyes. Two of the Americans kidnapped in Mexico were found dead yesterday. The two other victims are alive, although one is badly injured. They were in a village about 15 miles from where they were kidnapped Friday. A suspect has been detained. More documents were released yesterday in a lawsuit against Fox News. A voting systems company, Dominion, is suing the network for airing false claims that the 2020 election was stolen and that it was part of the plot. That trial starts next month. Oklahoma voters rejected a state question Tuesday to allow for the recreational use of marijuana, following a late blitz of opposition from faith leaders, law enforcement, and prosecutors. House Republicans on Wednesday will hold, and that's today, will hold their first hearing on the botched 2021 withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan. The House Foreign Committee, led by Chairman Mike McCall, will hear from a handful of veterans of the Afghanistan war. Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and other Senate Republicans lashed out at conservative Fox News host Tucker Carlson on Tuesday after he characterized the deadly January 6th attack on the Capitol as, get this, mostly peaceful chaos. And Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders signed into law this week legislation that rolls back significant portions of the state's child labor protections. And cell phone video shows a passenger on a United Airlines flight threatening to kill every man on the plane before allegedly attacking a flight attendant with a broken metal spoon. Lots going on in the news today, and this is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. In my first hour, I'm joined by my brilliant contributors. George Mason University Professor Michael Fontroy is back with us, and Chris Walton joins the program again. And in this hour, KBLA Justice Correspondent Dion Raymond will bring the latest from inside the courtroom in the federal prosecution of LA City Council member Mark Ridley Thomas on that 19-count bribery indictment. And in this hour, I go one-on-one with California Congresswoman Barbara Lee about her historic bid to become the nation's only Black female U.S. Senator. And in my second hour, because it's International Women's Day, I am joined by two powerhouse women, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass and California State Controller Malia Cohen. We are celebrating women. And as Issa Rae says, I'm rooting for all Black women all over this nation today. But before I bring on my guest, I want you to kind of hear what I'm thinking about in real time. Because it's International Women's Day, I thought today was the perfect day to keep it real about Black women, particularly those Black women in public office. Now, we all know that Black women who run for public office today face a great deal of sexism and racism. Their prospects fade as they go higher and higher. We have acknowledged and have witnessed some tremendous gains. We have to, take note of Kamala Harris and the barriers that she broke as the nation's first Black and Asian American female president. And we know that more Black women are leading major cities like LA and Chicago and San Francisco. But do you know this, that a Black woman has never, ever been a governor of a state in this country? And only two Black women have been U.S. senators. That's Carol Moseley Braun and our own Kamala Harris. And let's be clear, winning political office as a Black woman still poses familiar and enduring challenges. Women face blatant racism, blatant sexism, and also very subtle forms of racial and gender bias that make it more difficult for them to raise money, get their message out, and to even get the vote of white voters. My three guests today, all Black female trailblazing elected officials, can attest to confronting these barriers. But these sisters, these badass sisters, they are going to share their secrets of perseverance and overcoming in real time. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
here for JP Morgan Chase.
Thank you so much. Yes, my name is Tatiana Roberts. I am a community manager for JP Morgan Chase. I have to honestly say that this has been the most fulfilling position that I've ever had, where I get to give back to the community because I saw my mom's struggles. That's really what fuels what I do to make sure that that the community has all the access to the resources that my mother didn't have.
So for the mother who's in business, what are 3 quick tips you can give to ensure that they're on the right path to accessing financial support from a bank like Chase?
Say number 1, just make sure that you're checking your credit on a consistent basis and taking action to either fix your credit, maintain your credit, or rebuild your credit. The second thing would be budget. I know that B word is kind of like ugly for right? A lot of people don't like that B word, but it has to be done. We need to tell our money where to go. The last thing is to build a network of supporters that are going to lift you up.
The community building here in Crenshaw is that network. So visit the Chase Community Center on Crenshaw and Vernon. Meet a banker today. Tell them about your business. I'm Aisha Cairo in the community for KBLA with JP Morgan Chase.
KBLA Talk 1580 celebrates Women's History Month, sponsored by Walmart. As we celebrate Women's History Month this month, KBLA Talk 1580 would like to spotlight women leaders in our community who are creating positive change. If you or someone you know is making a difference in your community, please nominate them with a 50-word or less post on why you feel they should be included in the KBLA Women's Series, sponsored by Walmart. These women leaders will be featured on KBLA, interviewed on KBLA, and participate in a panel discussion hosted by Areva Martin in real time. Visit the KBLA app or log on to KBLA1580.com to nominate a woman in your community that is creating positive change. This has been a KBLA Talk 1580 community call to action.
I'm Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I learned about atrial fibrillation the hard way. My symptoms would come and go: shortness of breath, fatigue. I kept going. Then I got so lightheaded, I couldn't. My doctor said I have AFib, so I'm about 5 times more likely to have a stroke. Other symptoms: irregular heartbeat, heart racing, chest pain can come and go, but the risk of stroke stays. If you have symptoms, tell a doctor. Visit notimetowait.com.
Sponsored by Bristol Myers.
I am joined today by 2 brilliant contributors. First, joining us, coming back to the program, is George Mason University professor Michael Fontroy. Hello, Professor Fontroy, and welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to hear you and see you again.
Always a pleasure, my friend. And Chris Walton, former chair of the Democratic Party of Milwaukee, is back with us today. Hello, Chris.
Hello, how are you? Thanks.
Fantastic. This was not in our rundown, but I would be remiss if I did not ask both of you to give me the name of the woman that you're thinking about today on International Women's Day. That woman that motivated you, inspired you, that you look up to. Tell me your shero. Chris, I'll start with you.
I was hoping you were going to go with me first. Man, that is it.
Oh, you don't have a woman on the tip of your tongue that you're celebrating on International Women's Day?
That's not the problem.
I'll be calling this dude.
There's so many I can think of. I have, of course, my mom. My mom first and foremost, because if it wasn't for her, there'd be nobody talking right now. My sister, my niece, my teachers. It's a hard one to pick. When in doubt, I'm going to go with my mom.
Never can go wrong with a mother. Okay. Hopefully she's listening and she heard that wonderful tribute you just played to her. How about you, my friend, Professor Fontroy?
So I'm going to start with mom because that's where it always starts. She was nurturing and with my father created an environment for my brother and me to grow up in love. My aunt Shirley in Orlando, I need to shout her out. And I'm also thinking about my 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Jones, who created a real sense of enthusiasm about learning. So I need to shout her out. And lastly, my 8th grade history teacher, who embarrassed me by calling me lazy. And but she said it in love because she prefaced it by saying, you are so talented. You have to stop being lazy. And that always stuck with me. And so there are a number of women who have helped to shape and mold me. And of course, in a different way, I have to shout out my wife too, in part because she might be listening and I don't want to get jacked up later.
Spoken like a true good husband. All right, guys. So what's up? This country, never a Black woman governor, only 2 Black women U.S. senators. Clearly, Black women are capable of leading. We've demonstrated that at every level. What is it going to take? We were so hopeful that Stacey Abrams would break through in that election in Georgia, not once, but twice, and she fell short, unfortunately, both times. What do you think it's going to take, Chris? You have been a chair of a Democratic Party, so you know what the party looks like on the Dem side, at the ground level. Mm-hmm. What's up with these states, our fellow Democrats not allowing or not electing a Black woman to be governor?
Right. And it's really sad. It is not for a lack of a bench, honestly. We have, we have more than capable Black women who are capable of leading states, being our senators, being Speaker of the House. We've had a lot of, we actually just got our first Black woman Speaker of the House in Pennsylvania, Joanne McClinton. So it's not for a lack of there being people there, but we also have to get people interested. We also have to get people motivated to know that, yes, you can run. We will give you the expertise you need. We will get behind you and push you, make sure you have the staff, make sure you have the fundraising capabilities. And that's something that we in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, for me especially, we have not focused that. We have not put the money behind the training of these candidates. We have not gone in and actually sought out Black women to run for these offices. In Milwaukee, we've been lucky. We actually have 2 Black women state senators representing the city of Milwaukee. Also, our Congresswoman is an African-American woman, Gwen Moore, as well as several members of our state assembly delegation. But you have to go out there and actively recruit these people. You can't just sit there on the sidelines and expect them to come knock on your door and say, I want to run. It's always great when that happens, but we have to go out there and find them too.
Yeah, Professor, the UN, United Nations, is warning this week that the years of progress towards gender equality is being lost. Women are losing rights around the world. Officials pointed to, these UN officials have pointed to the Taliban's crackdown in Afghanistan. They pointed to the loss of reproductive rights in the United States and the fact that women are being forced out of schools and the workforce around the world. So literally the headlines was, this is the day to celebrate. But the warning is 300 years of gender equality seems to be vanishing before our very eyes.
So let me also add the recent poisoning of his girls in Iranian schools that just came out last week. And so that's just one of a number of examples that you also pointed out that show there's tremendous resistance. So I agree with everything Chris said, but for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And the truth is that the growth of women in this space, the growth of people of color in these spaces creates a real threat to the status quo. And what we're seeing in terms of these rollbacks, not just in the United States and other places around the world, is that reaction. And so to overcome that, you really do have to flood the pipeline with so much talent that is difficult to overcome. I live in Washington, D.C. We have a woman as mayor, Muriel Bowser. She was just elected to her 3rd term. And just across the D.C. line in Maryland, there's a county leader by the name of Angela Alsobrooks, who I think has some potential along the lines as you look in the years going forward. So for me, it really is about flooding the pipeline. Eventually, there will be breakthroughs, but we do have to keep our eyes open to the reality that not everybody wants to see women lead. Not everybody wants to see Black and brown people lead. And we got to be clear about that too.
You're absolutely right about that, Professor. Not everybody wants to see women in positions of power, and some people still buy into those racist and sexist tropes about women, particularly women of color, not being capable of leading, that all we can do is cook and take care of your kids. We know that was the media image that was portrayed for decades in this country. And then, Chris, we see women like Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Arkansas governor, who's being put out there as the example of a woman leader that's being put out there as the example of Republicans trying to be more gender inclusive. And right. Sanders is in some ways as harmful and hateful as some of the white men who, you know, are Donald Trump supporters, avid Donald Trump supporters. She is signing laws that roll back portions of the state's child labor protection. She says they're redundant. They're not necessary. So you would think, here's Sarah Huckabee Sanders, a young mother herself. Mm-hmm. She would want to protect children, and she's doing just the opposite of that.
One would think, but, you know, it doesn't surprise me that a Southern governor would want to roll back child protections from child labor laws. Southern governors have proven time and again to really like having children at work. You know, you could dress up things to be whatever you want them to be. They still are. And, you know, you could put a woman in place in Arkansas, and she's still a Republican governor that's going to be rolling back child labor laws, fighting to make sure women don't have the right to choose what they want to have a child or not, making sure that they don't have Medicare expansion, making sure they don't have the resources they need to take care of their communities. So, yeah, you can put a woman in place. She's a prime example. But what is she actually doing to fight for women? What is she actually doing to fight for people in the community that is making the state of Arkansas and other places better? And obviously, as we can see, you know, she is not.
Yeah, a part of rolling back these labor laws that protect children is allowing children to go to work. Some of these states that are doing something very similar to Arkansas want kids to go to work at 14 and 15 years old. And we know they end up in these sweatshops oftentimes in these factories where they don't have protection. So if you couple the rolling back of these labor laws in these states where there's, you know, very little union protections, we can see kids being exploited in the worst way possible. I want to talk about go ahead, Michael. You want to jump in?
Let me just add quickly. Just
You're not in class. You have to raise your hand, though. Although I kind of like being your professor, so go ahead, raise your hand.
Okay, fine. So listen, Areva, just as there are Black people who, through their actions and words, tend to defend white supremacy, there are women who, through their words and actions, tend to defend misogyny and male supremacy. And so Sarah Huckabee Sanders is not a surprise in any meaningful way. Hopefully she is not the tip of the spear, so to speak, in the start of a new wave of women leaders across the country. I think that would be dangerous for children and other people who need more support around a variety of different ways. But we can't be surprised that she exists. And so people like her, just like Black people of a certain stripe, need to be identified and called out in public on their actions.
No, absolutely. We know she was held up she was given the responsibility of doing the response to Joe Biden's State of the Union. We know that she is supposed to be the softer, gentler version of the Donald Trump supporters, but she worked in the White House with Donald Trump. Her father is an avid Donald Trump supporter. I mean, she's Donald Trump just in a skirt. So we can't be fooled by that. You're so right, Professor. Chris, let me ask you about these Americans, these 4 Americans traveling to Mexico, 3 going with one lady who's going to get a cosmetic procedure. So far, the news is that they being the cartel in Mexico thought they were Haitian drug smugglers, perhaps trying to encroach on their territory. So they ambushed them, kidnapped them. 2 are murdered. A bystander in Mexico is murdered. They're taken to a stash house. They're moved around to, I mean, this is like right out of a movie, right out of, Queen of the South. If you ever watch Queen of the South, this is Queen of the South kind of stuff. And now 2 innocent people are dead. What does this say about the risk of traveling and becoming what we know is this term medical tourist, when you're going internationally to get a medical procedure? How risky is that?
You got to be careful. You got to be careful. You got to do the research and look at just the different information that's put out. I know reading more into the story, I saw that the State Department had actually put out a notice saying that Americans traveling into these areas be extra careful, be extra cautious, and basically don't go this area because they're looking to kidnap Americans. It's very tragic. This is a sad, tragic event and very misfortunate to happen to them. We send prayers and positive thoughts toward the families. But you gotta do your research into a lot of these areas when you're going to do these things, and make sure you're putting yourself not at risk while you're trying to take care of yourself. So it's really sad. It's a tragedy.
Yeah, and Professor, I guess the real tragedy is we know the cost of medical care in the U.S. We know the cost of pharmaceuticals. We know that many people are going to Mexico just for routine root canals and dental procedures and other routine surgeries because they don't have health insurance and they don't have access to high quality medical care. Some go because doctors in the U.S. say, no, we're not going to do that procedure because it's not safe. But many, and I know people that have gone to Mexico from Los Angeles, from California, because they couldn't afford medical care in the U.S. I think that's what breaks my heart about this story is there are people who have to travel outside of this country, that the richest nation in the world, that people have to risk their lives, one going under the knife, perhaps of a doctor that's not well trained, not accredited, not to say that they all aren't trained, but you don't know that. You don't have the protection of, the CDC and some of the other regulatory bodies that we have here in the U.S. What would you recommend to someone who's poor, who doesn't have access to medical care, and they hear, hey, you can go across the border and get some medication or get a procedure?
Yeah, see, this is very difficult because the truth is that most people don't pay attention to those State Department announcements that Chris rightly pointed to. If you go on the State Department website, you can find all kinds of warnings about going into certain countries and certain parts of certain countries. And so one of the issues is, as Chris pointed out, you got to do your research. And then there's another piece of this, and I don't know all of the circumstances here, but, if you're traveling for cosmetic surgery, right? Or you're traveling for a procedure you need because you can't afford it. You really do have to think twice about how serious it is that you're willing to go to another country that does not have all of the protections and regulations that we've sort of become accustomed to. Medical tourism is a real thing. It goes on all over the place. The people that travel from the East Coast to India for certain kinds of procedures. We know that is real. But the grass isn't always greener, and you never know when something can pop up. And this is unfortunately the starkest reminder of that we've seen.
Right.
Yeah, we got to leave it there, guys. I want to thank you. It's International Women's Day, so I would be remiss if I didn't spend most of the 2 hours talking to women. So I got to say thank you to guys.
I guess you're forgiven this time.
I'd love to hang out and chat with you for the whole hour, but I got 3 powerhouse women, and I don't know, men, go get a day, and then we'll just talk to men all day. Well, I talk to you guys all the time, anyhow. So I'm not feeling any ounce of guilt. I want to thank you, though, for your brilliance on these topics. Always pleasure to see you, my friend, Professor Fauntleroy and Chris as well. And maybe next time I have you back, you'll have the solution to how we get the first Black woman elected as governor in this country, because that needs to happen.
I got a few ideas for you.
All right. Thank you for joining me.
Take
All
care.
right. You all know that we are covering the federal bribery trial of LA City Council member Mark Ridley Thomas. We're giving you gavel-to-gavel coverage every day right here on KBLA on my show, Areva Martin in Real Time at 4:35. Our justice correspondent, Dion Raymond, is going to be up on the other side of news, traffic, and sports. But I want to make sure that everybody understands what this case is about, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of bad information out there. So I just want to kind of lay the foundation for what this case is. Many of you know Mark Ridley Thomas, very prominent elected official, has spent his life in public service. He's been accused of steering contracts to the University of Southern California's School of Social Work in exchange for his son Sebastian's admission and full ride scholarship to the school, as well as, according to the prosecutors, a paid professorship for Sebastian. Prosecutors have also accused him of working with a now retired dean of the USC School of Social Work, Marilyn Flynn, to funnel $100,000 through USC to his son's nonprofit initiative. Basically, the government is saying Sebastian had a career in the California State Assembly. He got accused of sexual harassment, and rather than allow his name or the family's name to be tarnished, Mark Ridley Thomas, came up with this plan to get him hired at the University of Southern California, to get him admitted to the School of Social Work, and to have him start this nonprofit. And somehow that would, clean up his name, clean up his reputation, keep intact the family's reputation. The prosecutor we're going to hear from, our justice correspondent's whole theory that this is a case about power and privilege of this powerful elected official, Mark Ridley Thomas, trying to maintain the family's name. Now, you're also going to hear from our justice correspondent today that the Ridley Thomas team is pushing back. And they are laying out their case. And we're learning now that a part of their case is establishing that Mark Ridley Thomas, as many of us know, has a history of supporting some of the very same initiatives that are a part of this allegation. And that, in fact, Sebastian Ridley Thomas was retiring from the state assembly, not for sexual harassment, but because he had a legitimate medical issue. So one thing to remember in a trial, prosecution always goes first. Make no determination, reach no conclusions until you hear both sides of the story. And if you know anything about Mark Ridley Thomas, you know Mark Ridley Thomas has hired the best lawyers, and there is another side to this story. When we come forward after news, sports, and traffic, our justice correspondent, Dion Raymond, with Gavel to Gavel coverage of the Mark Ridley Thomas federal bribery trial, right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Julius White. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. A new report says there was a fifth person traveling with the 4 U.S. citizens who were recently kidnapped in Mexico. NBC News reports the additional passenger left the trip before crossing the border into Mexico because she didn't have the proper identification. 2 of the victims from South Carolina were killed in the kidnapping that occurred last week. 2 others are now recovering in a Texas hospital. The NBA's Memphis Grizzlies star Ja Morant will not face charges in Colorado over an incident involving a gun last weekend. The MTA is planning to open more bathrooms at subway stations across New York City, and riders are relieved.
We need it sometimes. Trains are delayed. We have to wait here for long hours. So we need that bathroom.
More than 100 bathrooms closed during the pandemic, and the first 9 reopened in January. I'm Julius White on your home for 24/7 News, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
In Elysian Park on the 5 northbound right after the 110, got a report of a car fire over on the right shoulder. You're going to see some delays from the 10. In Newhall on the 5 northbound before you get to the 14, disabled vehicle is in the center lane, and it's going to be stop and go coming away from the 405. In Redondo Beach on the 405 southbound before Inglewood Avenue, got a brand new crash. The center lane is blocked. It's slow from Imperial Highway.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com. Shopping for new blinds? At Blindster, we offer over 50 different blinds, shades, and shutters at low prices, custom made for your windows, and shipping is free. Shop at home and order 10 free samples of any product before you buy. Blindster.com.
Meet Joe A,
Hi.
Joe B,
Hello,
and Joe C.
What's up?
3 everyday Joes perfecting their banking with Chase. Joe A is locking his lost debit card with the Chase mobile app. Joe B is cruising toward his new ride with AutoSave. And Joe C's Chase banker is helping him budget to go back to school. Tools that help protect, support for what's next. One bank that puts you in control. Visit chase.com/checking. Chase, make more of what's yours.
Chase mobile app is available for select mobile devices. Messaging and data rates may apply. JP Morgan Chase Bank, NA member FDIC.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Here are some NFL teams to keep an eye on regarding Lamar Jackson. Indianapolis, Houston, Las Vegas, Tampa Bay, Washington, Carolina, and the New York Jets. The Baltimore Ravens placed the non-elusive franchise tag on Jackson, which allows the former MVP to entertain offers from other teams. In honor of Women's History Month, let me introduce you to Sheila Johnson. She's the first African-American woman to have ownership with 3 major sports teams: the NBA Washington Wizards, the Washington Mystics in the WNBA, and the Washington Capitals in the National Hockey League. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. This sports report was brought to you by Original Taco Pete.
Aaron at Original Taco Pete's. Come in today for our tasty seasoned black taco. We're at 3272 West Slauson off Crenshaw, or call 323-348-4441.
Follow the leader. KBLA Talk 1580. Follow the leader. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580. Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the leader at KBLA 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Keep following the leader.
Thanks to our new sponsor, Lendistry. Lendistry is a national Black-led small business lender that is headquartered in Los Angeles. Lendistry helps small business owners access the affordable capital needed to grow. Visit Lendistry, LENDISTRY.com/KBLA today.
KBLA Talk 1580 would like to thank all of the businesses that tune into KBLA at work. We celebrate you, your calls to the station, and your overall support. To show our appreciation, we would like to treat your office to lunch for 10, sponsored by John O'Groats family-owned restaurant and johnogroats.us. Open the KBLA Talk 1580 app or log on to KBLA1580.com to submit your office to be selected for our Office of the Week. We know you're just like our staff, putting in many hard, smart working hours per week. We just want to say thank you, and we appreciate you. You and your staff deserve lunch on us. Enter your office to win lunch for 10 and be highlighted on KBLA Talk 1580 as our Office of the Week. Open the KBLA app or log on to KBLA1580.com to enter your office today to become the KBLA Talk 1580 Office of the Week. Sponsored by John O'Groats family-owned restaurant and johnogroats.us. Become the KBLA Talk 1580 Office of the Week. This has been a KBLA Talk 1580 community call to action. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 joins you in standing for voting rights. When We All Vote is a leading national nonpartisan initiative on a mission to change the culture around voting and to increase participation in each and every election by helping to close the race and age gap. Created by Michelle Obama, When We All Vote brings together individuals, institutions, brands, and organizations to register new voters across the country and advance civic education for the entire family and voters of every age to build and inform and engage for today and generations to come. When We All Vote empowers their supporters and volunteers to take action through voting, advocating for their rights, and holding their elected officials accountable. Please visit whenweallvote.org to stand up for your rights, voting rights. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
There's no time like
This is our exclusive coverage of the case, the United States of America versus Mark Ridley Thomas. And I'm joined in this segment by KBLA's justice correspondent, Deanne Raymond. She has been inside that federal courthouse downtown Los Angeles all day, and she's here to give us a download on what happened in trial today. Hello, Deanne. How are you?
Hi, Areva. I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm hearing that the case is moving pretty quickly, that not only did they get through the opening statements by both the prosecution and the defense attorney, but that 2 witnesses were actually called on behalf of the prosecution earlier today. Tell us what happened.
Yes, you heard correctly, Areva. This judge is definitely sending the message that she intends to move things along. So we had today the opening statements, and we got to hear for the first time the prosecution's theme, which they are saying is this is a story of power, privilege, and lies. And so their theory is that Mark Ridley Thomas was motivated to seek favors and to give favors in return because of alleged sexual harassment claims that were made against his son, Sebastian Ridley Thomas. Now, I think
we know Sebastian was in the state legislature at the time of these allegations. And as I recall, there was some indication that maybe he was being investigated and Mark Ridley Thomas wanted to cover that up or wanted to give him a soft landing space. Is that what the prosecutor is arguing, that this is all about Mark Ridley Thomas trying to ensure that his son had a job at the university, got admitted into graduate school, and had the opportunity to start a nonprofit?
Correct. That's exactly what they are alleging, that he was given a paid position as a professor of practice. Also that he was rushed through admissions. The prosecution made a point of hitting that his application came after the official admissions process had already closed, and that that his application wasn't complete.
Let me move you forward. Deanne, tell us what Mark Ridley Thomas's team is arguing. We've heard a lot about the prosecution's argument. We've read it in the newspaper. What we haven't seen a lot of is the defense's response to the prosecutor's allegations. So what can we expect in terms of evidence from the defense?
Yes, the defense really clapped back, and they were very clear. They told a story. And the story that they told, their theme is that the government is not telling you everything, which really early on raises the specter of reasonable doubt. And so the defense's position is that Mark Ridley Thomas did not do anything illegal, that he did not violate any finance laws with regards to the money that went to USC, that he did everything in good faith. They're really establishing his state of mind, asking what did he know, what was he told, and what did he do, that he relied on his lawyers, and that he also relied on information from staff.
And we know that a big part of Mark Ridley Thomas's defense, because I've looked at some of the trial documents, is that, look, this is a guy that had a history of making investments in marginalized communities. He had a history in working on issues of juvenile justice, mental health, homelessness, all of these social ills, and that these contracts had already been put in place consistent with his body of work, and that they weren't specifically unique. They didn't come about because of whatever was going on with his son and his departure from the California State Legislature. How impactful was that argument, do you think, to the jurors?
I think it was very impactful. You could see the jurors starting to kind of sit up, pay attention, take notes. I think it was very effective, Areva, particularly because the defense very well established Ridley Thomas's ties, longstanding connection to South LA. They talked about that he and his wife still live in South LA, that a lot of his of the second district comprised of South LA, Compton, Inglewood. And so I feel like they were very effective in establishing that he was already not just connected to these services that DMH, probation, DCFS, that he had already started this long before any of these alleged illegal acts took place.
Let's talk about the witnesses. We know that the prosecution called 2 witnesses today. Who are they? And quickly, what did they have to offer?
The first witness is Brenda Wewell, and she is a social worker by trade, and she was then the initiative, she was the director for the initiative to eliminate homelessness. And she's the individual who, Marilyn Flynn, who was the dean of the School of Social Work, she's the person who delivered a letter to the Hall of Administration for Mark Ridley Thomas, summarizing things that she and Mark Ridley Thomas had talked about, which are the subject of this lawsuit.
All right. And that prosecution witness, do you think that was a score for the prosecution, or how well did the defense do in cross-examining that witness?
I would say 50-50, actually, Areva, because of some of her responses to the government's questions, such as, did you think very much about the fact that she had you deliver it? Well, no. And the fact that she delivered it to the Hall of Administration, she did not hand it directly to Mark Ridley Thomas or any one of his staffers. And so what the jury is left to think about, Areva, is, did he even get it?
Okay, didn't even establish that the letter got in his hand. What about that second witness, Deon? Who was the second witness, and what did they have to say?
Second witness was Dr. John Clapp, and he was then the vice dean of the School of Social Work. And what they used him to establish was that the whole process for admitting Sebastian Ridley Thomas was inconsistent and raised a lot of red flags. For instance, that he would be a student in the School of Social Work and Public Policy, and that this would be done online, or also that there would be a conflict of interest for him to be a professor in the very department getting his graduate degree.
And how did the defense try to address that on cross-examination?
Well, we concluded for the day at 2. They haven't even finished with him, so that's what we will be taking up with first thing tomorrow morning.
Let's talk about the lawyers real quickly. Trials are a test of wills. Often you have these two gladiators going at each other. We know Mark Ridley Thomas has this international law firm representing him, Morrison and Forrester. He has what some believe to be two of the top trial lawyers in the country, Daryl Enduri and Galia Armran. And then we have some very experienced U.S. attorneys on the other side. What did you make of the style and the technique of the lawyers on both sides today?
I want to tell you, Areva, both sides are polished, and there's just the documents are voluminous, right? And there's a lot of ease around the organization of the documents and pulling them up. Both sides are just equally savvy with technology and getting things up there and having visuals for the jury to see. They're both very competent. They both sides have a great command of the facts. If I had to give a win to one side or the other today, I'm going to give it to the defense because their attorneys on opening, I felt really told the story, or they were able to tell a story in a way that jurors can understand, right?
Yeah, that power of persuasion. So yes, they told that story gives you, a good lawyer can give you some tidbits that stay with you. Even though the trial may be 4 weeks, 5, 6 weeks long, you go back to that. Oh, that was that lawyer that said that. Or that was that lawyer that, really hit home this point. That's what a good trial lawyer should do. They should be a great storyteller.
A good storyteller. And they came out with their boxing gloves on by saying, look at all the information that the government chose to leave out in their presentation about what the evidence would show, and immediately raises doubt, or at least would have an individual thinking,
why is the government hiding something? If their case is so strong, why didn't they talk to all the witnesses? Why didn't they do a complete investigation? Starts to get jurors thinking that this is cherry picking, that maybe this is selective prosecution, that this prosecution would be different if we weren't talking about a prominent African-American elected officials. I know that's a big part of the theme we're going to see played throughout this trial by the defense, planting that seed that this was selective prosecution because this is a man who had a longstanding history in this community and doing work in this community. Deon, great coverage today. I know you're going to be back at it tomorrow in that courtroom when the doors open. We can count on you to give us that gavel to gavel inside information inside that federal courthouse for a trial that's being watched around the city, around the state, and I venture to say around this nation. It's the United States of America, and that's a big deal. The United States of America versus LA City Council member Mark Ridley Thomas. When we come forward, more International Women's Day with 3 powerhouse women. KBLA Talk 1580.
Did you know California Black women serve as breadwinners in
I'm back, and we are tracking today's trending news. Lots of news in policing and the Justice Department today. Today, the U.S. Justice Department found that the Louisville Police Department used aggressive style police tactics, especially as it relates to Black people. Now, this comes after the Justice Department opened a widespread, or wide scale, I should say, investigation of the Louisville Metropolitan Police Department after the raid that killed Breonna Taylor. The Justice Department went into that police department, spent about 2 years doing this very thorough investigation. They investigated whether the police department used excessive force. They found that officers used unreasonable tactics, including unjustified neck restraints, police dogs, and tasers. In this scathing report from the Justice Department, they also found that the police department, this Louisville Police Department, also executed search warrants without knocking and announcing. And we know that was the issue in the Breonna Taylor case, that this raid took place. They were searching, so they said, for the police were looking for someone they thought was, storing drugs in Breonna Taylor's apartment. Apparently, her boyfriend didn't hear them, or they didn't announce themselves. The shots were fired, and that's how innocent, unarmed Breonna Taylor was killed. And for years, what this report tells us, that this Louisville Police Department has practiced an aggressive style of policing that they've deployed selectively against Black people. I wish I could say I was shocked, that I was stunned, that I was in any way surprised by this report from the Justice Department. But unfortunately, this report is coming out at the same time that an internal investigation that's been conducted of the Memphis Police Department following the brutal beating of Tyree Nichols, they have conducted their own investigation, and I suspect the U.S. Attorney's Office is going to go into Memphis as well. If you can remember, U.S. Justice Department under former Attorney General Eric Holder went into the Ferguson, Missouri Police Department after the shooting death of Mike Brown. We've seen these Justice Department investigations happen with police departments all over this country. They didn't, Donald Trump, when he was in office for 4 years, he put a chokehold, no pun intended, on the Justice Department. And a lot of these investigations were suspended, if not terminated altogether. And since Joe Biden has been in office, different Justice Department under Merrick Garland, they have been going back into these police departments that have a horrific history of aggressive policing, unconstitutional policing, shooting, killing, using chokeholds on primarily African Americans. And the findings aren't all that shocking. I guess what's irritating to me in real time, what I'm thinking, is the recommendations. And I can read you the laundry list: de-escalation training, implicit bias training, training on how and when to use body cameras, training on how to use and deploy certain tactics. We've heard it time and time and time again. Yet it's almost impossible to pick up a newspaper, to look at a piece of news and not see yet another shooting, yet another incident involving police, and primarily police shooting, or in some way harming, doing injury, and in many cases killing Black folks. So the question we have to ask, and we know the famous saying, if you keep doing the same thing the same way and getting the same result, that's the classic definition of insanity. And I think when we think about policing in this country, our approach to it is just that. It's insane, because we keep going into these police departments, finding what we could say a blind person can see inside these departments, and then making the same recommendations: more training, more implicit bias. Obviously, lots of consultants, lots of trainers are making a lot of money in doing this training, but we're not seeing the needle move. We're not seeing a substantial decrease in the number of people that are shot and killed every year by the police. And you have to ask yourself, what is it going to take? What is it going to take to get policing in this country to look differently, to get police to respect the constitutional rights of all citizens, particularly African-American citizens? Is it ever going to change? And for many, folks are just learning the whole history of policing in this country and, the origins of it. suggests that Black folks in particular aren't going to fare well with the police in any situation. So my thoughts about what's happening with the Justice Department in Louisville and Memphis. We'll keep our eyes on that. We'll watch that space and see if there are any substantive changes. But today is International Women's Day, and we're trying to look on the positive. We're celebrating women. We are celebrating our Black elected officials. We have Representative Barbara Lee from northern part of California joining us. We have Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, and we have California Controller Malia Cohen. I think we have Congresswoman Barbara Lee on the line.
Hello. Hi. Can you hear me?
I can. Good afternoon. And thank you so much for joining us, Congresswoman.
I'm happy to be with you.
And first of all, congratulations on your bid for U.S. Senate. We know that you are running to succeed Senator Dianne Feinstein in California. You are the highest ranking Black woman in the House of Representatives. And from that vantage point, I would say you have several advantages in this race. You're on this powerful House Appropriations and Budget Committee, and you also have gained, obviously, national recognition as a leading anti-war voice in Congress. I want to talk to you, though, about the challenges that you face in all Black women running for office, particularly offices like the U.S. Senate, after some news, sports, and traffic. And when we come forward, more with Congresswoman Barbara Lee.